How frontiersmen turned raw hides into survival gear. The morning air bites cold against his face. Blood still warm on his hands. The deer lies motionless in the snow. But for this frontiersman, the hunt has just begun. In his mind, he's already seeing what others cannot. This isn't just meat. This is clothing, shelter, tools, rope, water containers, life itself. His knife moves with practiced precision, not just butchering, engineering, every cut calculated, every strip of hide precious, because out here, beyond the settlements, beyond help, this dead animal will keep him alive through the winter. But how did frontiersmen transform a bloody, stinking hide into soft buckskin that could stop an arrow? How did they turn raw animal skin into waterproof containers, durable moccasins, and rope strong enough to hang a man? How did they master techniques so complex that modern tanners struggle to replicate them? This isn't primitive craftsmanship. This is sophisticated chemistry, developed over thousands of years, perfected by necessity. Today, we're exploring the lost art that turned death into life on the American frontier. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. The transformation of raw hide into survival gear, one of the most critical skills any frontiersman had to master. Without it, death was certain. With it, a man could live indefinitely in the wilderness, using nothing but what nature provided. Part 1. The knowledge. The first frontiersmen who ventured beyond the Appalachians. They learned quickly. European leather-making techniques, useless in the wilderness. No oak bark mills, no lime pits, no months to wait for hides to cure. Out here, you learned from the people who had perfected these techniques over centuries. Native Americans. The knowledge transfer wasn't always peaceful. Sometimes it came through trade, sometimes through capture, sometimes through desperate observation. But it came because survival demanded it. The Indians have a way of dressing skins that makes them soft as cloth, wrote Daniel Boone in his journal. A white man who cannot make his own leather will not last a winter in Kentucky. The techniques varied by tribe, by region, by available materials, but the principles remained constant. Transform the hide, before it rots, into something useful. Something that could mean the difference between life and death. Plains tribes specialized in buffalo, massive hides, thick, durable, perfect for typus and winter robes. Woodland tribes mastered deer and elk, smaller hides, more delicate, ideal for clothing and containers. Mountain tribes worked with whatever they could kill. Bighorn sheep, bear, even wolf. Each animal presented different challenges. Buffalo hides, thick as leather armor, required different tools, different techniques. Deer hides, thin and delicate, could tear if handled wrong. Bear hides, oily and difficult to process, but incredibly warm when finished. The frontiersmen who survived. They learned it all. Adapted techniques, combined European knowledge with indigenous wisdom, created hybrid methods that worked with available materials, in harsh conditions, under time pressure. Because time was always the enemy. A fresh hide, maybe 24 hours before it started to rot. In summer heat, less. The clock started ticking. The moment the animal died. Process it wrong, lose everything. Process it right, gain months of survival. The learning curve was steep, deadly steep. Men died because they couldn't process hides properly. Froze to death in clothes that fell apart. Starved because their containers leaked. Died of exposure because their shelter materials failed. But those who mastered the techniques, they thrived. Built trading empires. On processed hides, became legends. Like Hugh Glass, who survived a bear attack, crawled 200 miles, using hide processing skills, to repair his torn equipment along the way. The knowledge spread, through necessity, through desperation, through the simple fact that men who couldn't process hides didn't survive to pass on their genes. Natural selection, in its purest form. Part 2. The process. Understanding hide processing requires thinking like a chemist. This isn't just scraping meat off skin. This is molecular transformation, breaking down proteins, rearranging fiber structures, creating new materials with properties that don't exist in nature. Fresh hide, essentially raw meat. Proteins, bound together in rigid structures, full of water, blood, fat, bacteria already starting to multiply. Without intervention, it rots, becomes useless, within hours. The first step, always the same. Remove everything that isn't hide, meat, fat, blood vessels, membrane layers, every scrap, because anything left behind becomes a point of failure, a place for bacteria to grow, a weakness that will destroy the finished product. The tools were simple but effective. Scrapers made from split leg bones, sharpened to razor edges, stone blades, knapped from flint or chert, metal knives when available. Through trade or raid, each tool designed for specific tasks, specific cuts, specific pressures. The work was brutal, hours of scraping, muscles burning, hands cramping, blood under the fingernails. But precision was everything. Scrape too little, bacteria grows. Scrape too much, puncture the hide. Either mistake means starting over. If you have another hide, if you don't, you die. I have seen men work 16 hours straight, wrote mountain man Jim Bridger, scraping a single buffalo hide because they knew their lives depended on getting it right. The fleshing beam, critical piece of equipment. Smooth log, angled at 45 degrees, supported at both ends, the hide draped over it. Flesh side up, the scraper pushed away from the body. Never toward, because a slip could mean a severed artery, death in the wilderness. But removing the flesh, only the beginning. The real transformation came next. And this is where European and Native American techniques diverged completely. Brain tanning, the soft revolution, the discovery that changed everything. Animal brains could transform hide into something soft as cloth, waterproof as rubber, durable as iron when processed correctly. The chemistry is elegant. Brain tissue contains lecithin, a natural emulsifier that breaks down the rigid protein structures in hide fibers, makes them flexible and pliable while maintaining strength. Nature provides exactly what's needed. One deer brain tans one deer hide. One buffalo brain tans one buffalo hide. Perfect proportions built into the system by millions of years of evolution. The process begins with preparation. The brain removed from the skull carefully, avoiding contamination. Mixed with hot water in a large container, mashed by hand until it resembles thick soup. The hide, already fleshed and cleaned, soaked in this brain solution for hours. The lecithin penetrating deep into the fibers, breaking down the rigid protein bonds that make raw hide stiff and brittle. But soaking alone isn't enough. The hide must be worked constantly while it dries, stretched, pulled, twisted, rubbed against rough surfaces. The physical action, combined with the chemical treatment, creates the transformation. Work the hide like your life depends on it, advised Cherokee elder Sequoia. Because it does. The working process could take days. The hide stretched on a wooden frame or worked by hand between two people, pulling back and forth like a giant rope. The fibers aligning, becoming supple, soft to the touch. Temperature was critical. Too hot and the brain solution spoiled. Too cold and it didn't penetrate. The sweet spot around body temperature. Warm enough for chemical action, cool enough to prevent spoilage. Humidity mattered too. Too dry and the hide cracked. Too wet and it never finished. The experienced processor could read the signs, feel the texture, know exactly when the hide was ready for the next step. The result: buckskin, soft as velvet, strong as steel cable, waterproof when properly finished, washable, repairable, the perfect material for frontier survival. Bark tanning, the durable alternative. While brain tanning created soft, flexible leather, bark tanning produced something different. Harder, more durable, better suited for tools and containers that needed rigid strength. The process used tannins, chemical compounds found in tree bark, especially oak. These tannins bonded with hide proteins, creating crosslinks that made the leather hard and waterproof. Gathering bark required timing. Spring was best when sap was rising and the bark peeled easily from freshly cut trees. Oak was preferred, but other trees worked. Hemlock, chestnut, even willow in desperate situations. The bark was ground into powder using stone mortars or simply pounded with rocks. The finer the powder, the better the penetration into hide fibers. Some frontiersmen spent days preparing bark for a single hide. The tanning solution was made by boiling bark powder in water, creating a tea rich in tannins. The hide soaked in this solution for weeks, sometimes months, depending on thickness and desired hardness. "A properly bark-tanned hide," wrote frontier trader Alexander Henry, "will turn a knife blade and hold water like a wooden bucket." The process was slower than brain tanning, but the results were different. Bark-tanned leather could be shaped while wet and hold that shape when dry. Perfect for containers, tool sheaths, armor. The trade-off was flexibility. Bark-tanned leather was stiffer, less comfortable against the skin. But for certain applications, it was superior to any other material available on the frontier. The smoking, final preservation. Both brain-tanned and bark-tanned hides required one final step to achieve true preservation: smoking. The process that transformed processed hide into permanent leather. The chemistry of smoking creates aldehydes, chemical compounds that bond permanently with hide proteins, making the leather resistant to water, bacteria, and decay. Without smoking, even properly tanned hide would eventually rot. The smoking setup required careful engineering. A cone-shaped structure made from the hide itself, sewn together with sinew or plant fibers, suspended over a smoldering fire. The smoke trapped inside, penetrating every fiber. The fire was critical. Too hot and the hide cooked, became brittle. Too cool and insufficient smoke. The ideal fire used punk wood, rotten logs that smoldered without flame, creating dense smoke at low temperature. Different woods created different properties. Oak smoke made leather harder. Pine smoke added water resistance. Apple wood created pleasant smell. Willow smoke kept insects away. Experienced processors chose their wood based on intended use. The smoking process took 8 to 12 hours, with continuous attention required. Maintaining the fire, adjusting the hide, ensuring even smoke distribution. One mistake could ruin days of work. "I have seen a man sit up all night tending a smoking hide because he knew his winter survival depended on getting it right," wrote explorer John Coulter. The finished product was unmistakable. Golden brown color, distinctive smell, soft to the touch but incredibly strong, waterproof, insect-resistant, capable of lasting decades with proper care. From hide to survival gear. The transformation complete. Raw hide became the foundation of frontier survival. Every piece had multiple uses. Nothing was wasted because waste meant death. Clothing came first. Buckskin shirts cut and sewn with sinew thread, pants that moved like a second skin, never binding, never tearing under stress. Moccasins crafted with different sole patterns for different terrain. Summer moccasins thin and flexible. Winter moccasins thick and insulated. "A man in proper buckskins," observed frontiersman Simon Kenton, "could move through the forest like a ghost, silent, invisible, deadly." Containers were essential. Possibles bags carried everything a man needed to survive. Shot pouches held ammunition. Powder horns made from animal horns but lined with leather for waterproofing. Water containers fashioned from stomach linings could hold gallons without leaking. Tools and weapons required leather components. Knife sheaths protected blades from damage and weather. Bowstrings made from sinew were stronger than any plant fiber. Arrow wrappings held fletching in place through countless shots. Shelter materials were often the difference between life and death. Tipi covers made from multiple hides sewn together could house entire families through brutal winters. Lean-to walls provided windbreaks in temporary camps. Ground cloths kept moisture from seeping up through bedding. Rope and cordage cut from hide in continuous spirals could support enormous weights. Rawhide rope when wet would shrink, creating joints tighter than any knot. When dry, it was stronger than modern cable. The versatility was endless. Hinges for doors made from flexible leather. Windows covered with thin, translucent hide. Bellows for forges fashioned from leather bags. Even musical instruments. Drums and rattles used processed hides for sound production. The tools of transformation. The difference between success and failure often came down to the tools a frontiersman carried for hide processing. These weren't store-bought implements, but crafted by hand from available materials, each one designed for specific tasks. The fleshing knife was the most important tool in the arsenal, made from whatever metal could be obtained. Trade knives, broken sword blades, even pieces of barrel hoops hammered flat and sharpened to razor edges. The blade curved to follow the contours of the hide without cutting through. "A good fleshing knife," wrote mountain man Joe Meek, "is worth more than gold out here in the mountains, because gold won't keep you warm, but a properly processed hide will." Scrapers came next. Bone scrapers made from split leg bones of large animals, the marrow removed. The bones split lengthwise, creating sharp edges that could remove flesh and fat without damaging the hide underneath. Stone scrapers knapped from flint, chert, or obsidian required skill to create, but were sharper than any metal when properly made. The edge could be refreshed by careful chipping, extending the tool's useful life indefinitely. The fleshing beam required careful construction. A smooth log, usually oak or maple, stripped of bark and sanded smooth with rough stones. Angled at precisely 45 degrees because too steep and the hide slipped, too shallow, and scraping was ineffective. Containers for tanning were often the most challenging to obtain. Large pottery vessels were ideal but fragile and heavy. Wooden barrels, when available, worked well but required careful waterproofing. Bark containers could be fashioned from large sheets of birch bark, sewn with sinew and sealed with pine pitch. Hide-stretching frames required engineering. Wooden poles lashed together in rectangular shapes. The hide attached with sinew or rawhide stretched tight but not so tight as to tear. The frame had to be portable for nomadic tribes but sturdy enough to withstand constant tension. Regional variations and adaptations. The vast expanse of the North American frontier created different challenges and opportunities. Each region developed unique techniques adapted to local conditions, available materials, and climate constraints. The Great Plains, dominated by buffalo, required techniques for processing massive hides. Some buffalo hides weighed over 100 pounds when fresh and required multiple people to handle safely. The thickness demanded different tools: heavier scrapers, stronger beams, longer processing times. Plains tribes developed the teepee as the ultimate expression of hide processing mastery. A single teepee required 12 to 20 buffalo hides sewn together with thousands of feet of sinew thread. The result was a structure that could house a family of 8, withstand 70-mile-per-hour winds, and be assembled or disassembled in under an hour. The teepee, observed artist George Catlin, represents the pinnacle of portable architecture. Nothing in European civilization approaches its efficiency. The eastern woodlands presented different challenges. Smaller animals like deer, elk, and bear required different techniques and more delicate handling. Thinner hides could tear if processed incorrectly. But the abundance of oak trees made bark tanning more practical than on the plains. Woodland tribes perfected the art of making containers from processed hides. Water buckets that could hold 5 gallons without leaking. Food storage bags that kept dried meat fresh for months. Maple syrup containers that could withstand boiling temperatures. The Rocky Mountains created unique challenges with high altitude, extreme temperature variations, and limited vegetation. Mountain men adapted techniques for harsh conditions, developing methods for processing hides in sub-zero temperatures when normal techniques would fail. High altitude affected drying times. The thin air caused hides to dry too quickly, creating brittleness. Mountain processors learned to control the drying process using snow and ice to slow moisture loss while maintaining flexibility in the finished product. The Southwest presented water scarcity issues. Traditional soaking methods required gallons of precious water. Desert tribes developed dry processing techniques that used minimal water but achieved similar results through mechanical action and natural oils. The economics of hide processing. Hide processing wasn't just a survival skill, it was the foundation of frontier economics. Processed hides became currency, trade goods, wealth storage. The difference between prosperity and poverty often came down to processing skills. A single buffalo hide properly processed could trade for a month's worth of supplies at a frontier post. Buckskin clothing commanded premium prices in eastern markets where the quality and durability were legendary. "A suit of buckskins," wrote trader William Ashley, "will outlast 3 suits of the finest wool and cost half as much to produce." The fur trade built entire fortunes on processed hides. Companies like the American Fur Company employed thousands of hide processors. The skilled craftsmen who could produce high-quality leather were paid premium wages for their expertise. Trading posts became centers of hide processing knowledge. Techniques were shared, improved, refined. The competition for quality drove innovation. New methods, better tools, more efficient processes all developed through economic pressure. The value chain extended far beyond the frontier. Processed hides shipped east became luxury goods in New York, Philadelphia, Boston. The wealthy paid enormous sums for genuine frontier buckskin, knowing it represented the finest leather available anywhere. But the economics also created exploitation. Native American tribes often traded raw hides for manufactured goods at unfavorable rates. The processing knowledge that added most of the value remained with the traders and processors. Legacy and modern applications. The knowledge of traditional hide processing didn't disappear with the frontier. It evolved, adapted, found new applications in modern contexts where quality and authenticity matter more than mass production. Traditional craftspeople continue the techniques for historical reenactment, museum displays, cultural preservation. The skills passed down through generations remain relevant for understanding human ingenuity and adaptation. Modern survivalists study traditional methods for emergency preparedness. The ability to process hides without modern chemicals or equipment remains valuable in disaster scenarios or remote locations where industrial resources are unavailable. Archaeological research uses traditional techniques to understand ancient cultures. By replicating processing methods, researchers gain insights into daily life, economic systems, social structures of prehistoric peoples. The environmental movement has renewed interest in traditional processing. Chemical-free methods produce leather without toxic runoff or harmful emissions. Some modern tanners are returning to bark tanning for ecological reasons. High-end leather goods sometimes use traditional methods for superior quality. Brain-tanned buckskin commands premium prices among collectors and craftspeople who appreciate the unique properties of traditionally processed leather. The techniques also inform modern materials science. Understanding how traditional methods achieved superior results helps develop new processing techniques that combine ancient wisdom with modern technology. Educational programs teach traditional skills to new generations, not just as historical curiosity, but as practical knowledge that connects people to their heritage and the natural world that sustained their ancestors. The story of hide processing reminds us that human survival has always depended on the ability to transform raw materials into useful goods. The frontiersmen who mastered these techniques demonstrated the ingenuity, persistence, and skill that built a civilization from wilderness. Their legacy lives on in every piece of quality leather, in every technique that transforms natural materials into human tools, in every demonstration that with knowledge, skill, and determination, human beings can adapt, overcome, and thrive in any environment. If you want to learn more about the survival techniques that kept frontiersmen alive in the harshest conditions, check out our episode on 7 survival tools that kept frontiersmen alive, where we explore the ingenious equipment that meant the difference between life and death on the frontier. And for more stories of human ingenuity and adaptation from America's frontier past, you'll find dozens of episodes waiting for you right here on Wild America.